I am about to expose an $8 trillion secret that the government hopes you never discover. The average person is giving up to 50% of their income away to federal and state taxes every year, while the ultra wealthy are paying almost nothing in taxes, and it is literally by design. Some of the most successful people pay the least amount of money in taxes, and they are not behind bars, they are not in trouble with the IRS, and they are not cheating most of the time. They are simply taking advantage of a system that allows them to get richer and richer while the average person gets poorer and poorer. And once you see this, it will change the way you look at building wealth. So today I want to show you how people are completely circumventing the tax system as a practicing CPA that has actually seen people do this at mycpacoach.com. So let's jump right in. Let's start with the $8 trillion secret. You have probably heard that the ultra rich do not pay income taxes. The problem is, though, most people do not actually know why or how that is the case. Well, here it is to start. The top 0.05% of US households hold over $8.5 trillion in something called unrealized capital gains. And if we include the entire top 1%, that number jumps up to $20 trillion. But what exactly does this mean? These unrealized gains represent increased wealth from assets that these people own that the government cannot tax, even if they wanted to. To illustrate, just imagine having a dollar and that dollar turning into $20 trillion and none of that being taxed by the government. This is all possible because the rich follow a playbook that allows them to effectively and legally do this without breaking any tax rules. It's actually how the rules were designed. The government cannot tax stocks you do not sell, real estate you hold forever, or other assets you simply buy, hold, and do not sell. The tax system is great at taxing income, but it's not great at taxing wealth. And because of that, there are really two systems at play for most people in the US. There's one for workers and there's a system for owners. Workers get taxed when they earn more and more income, but owners do not get taxed on their assets even when those assets rise in value. And the crazy thing is that that's just one piece of the puzzle here. The gap gets even wider once you add debt to the equation here. The ultra wealthy have figured out a way to use debt to cash out these assets without ever triggering taxes, effectively allowing them to escape the entire tax system altogether. There are two things we know America thrives on: debt and taxes. And isn't it ironic that you can use debt to avoid taxes? And again, this is all by design. The government designed the system this way. Most people don't know about it, and it really wasn't meant for most people to know about it. At least that's how it seems. The system seems like it's designed to teach you how to become a worker and pay into this system, not become an owner and benefit from this system. And that's why you won't learn about this in school or really anywhere else. But on the other hand, the ultra wealthy have entire offices filled with the best tax accountants, CPAs, financial advisors, and even tax attorneys who work on things like this all day for them. But as a practicing CPA who has actually helped ordinary people implement this strategy, I want to show you how almost anyone can build towards leveraging it. So let's break this down some more here. This strategy is commonly referred to as the buy, borrow, die strategy, and it starts with a key mindset shift around how you build wealth. Most people think about wealth building from an income perspective. They trade their time for income, they invest for income. Everything they do to increase their worth revolves around increasing their income. But here's a little secret that the wealthy use to avoid taxes. They don't earn income, at least they don't trigger income. They earn assets. For example, Elon Musk just famously received a $1 trillion compensation package, and guess what? Most of that compensation does not actually include income. Almost all of it will be paid in the form of equity through stocks and shares, not taxable income. The ultra wealthy understands that income is taxed, so they avoid receiving compensation that will be taxed as income, and they invest into things that do not trigger income tax. For example, when you receive a dividend from a stock you own, you pay dividend tax. When you receive interest income from things like your high yield savings account, you pay tax on that interest. When you sell something at a gain or generate any type of income, that income is subjecting you to taxation, period. But on the other hand, when your investment assets appreciate in value, you pay no taxes. For example, if your stock or crypto portfolio went from $1 to $1 million, none of that would be subject to income tax. If you own real estate property, the appreciation of that property is also not subject to income tax. Yes, you might pay property tax, but not income tax. And like we saw earlier, even when working or trading their time for money, the ultra wealthy avoid triggering income at all costs. They don't build their wealth solely through W-2 or business income. They get paid in stocks, shares, or other equity-based compensation, and when they do, it is not taxed. Not immediately anyway. In fact, some of the richest CEOs take a $1 salary from their companies while accumulating millions, if not billions of dollars in wealth through their companies. The value of their compensation is the same, but the form in which they earn it avoids it from being taxed by Uncle Sam. So the first key to escaping income tax completely is to start adapting an asset appreciation approach to building wealth, not solely an income-based approach. So what does that look like? Well, instead of investing for income, you might invest for appreciation. That might involve opting for equity-based compensation whenever possible, or simply buying stocks that grow in value instead of dividend or income-generating stocks. It might involve real estate investments that increase your equity over time, or even business investments that increase the value of your business. But ultimately, the mentality is simply to buy assets and build equity, period. And that is typically not taxed when and only when you follow this next step, which is never selling those assets. The moment you sell any asset that has risen in value, you will trigger tax, namely capital gains tax. So remember earlier, I mentioned that the ultra wealthy have $8 trillion in unrealized capital gains. These are gains on their assets that reflect how much those assets have risen in value. But it is unrealized because they have not sold it, which means the government cannot tax it. But if they sold all $8 trillion of those assets, the government would have a field day in collecting billions of dollars in taxes on those gains because they would immediately become taxable. But here's the thing, they never will. That's the game the wealthy play. They buy and accumulate all of these assets, let them rise in value, and avoid selling them to prevent Uncle Sam from getting involved. It's a simple buy and hold strategy. And the good news is that you don't actually have to be a billionaire to start doing this stuff. It just comes down to making long-term investments that will hold their value, not short-term stuff like day trading or flipping real estate where you're constantly buying and selling assets. And I have nothing against those things, by the way, but the fact of the matter is that you will constantly trigger taxes every time you sell something. This strategy seeks to avoid triggering income by buying assets that you plan to hold indefinitely, like real estate and stock portfolios you never plan to sell and don't have to because it contains good performing assets. And the goal for some people is that as those portfolios grow in value, you can leverage them or borrow against them to cash out some of that appreciation while still eliminating the tax man. This is 100% legal because the government does not tax loan proceeds. So if you bought a property for $200,000 and it becomes worth $500,000 and you borrow $300,000 against it, that $300,000 amount is not considered taxable income, so you don't pay tax on it. Then you might take that $300,000 and do other things with it. You might make improvements to your existing property to further increase your equity, or maybe you use it as a down payment for another property. And that's just an example. But you can borrow against many types of different assets like stocks, bonds, real estate, and even your own business if you have enough equity in those assets. And once you have that equity, most lenders will allow you to borrow against it, which is exactly what the ultra rich do to cash out from their investments without paying taxes. Then they use those dollars to buy more assets that rise in value, and their wealth just continues to compound and compound into an explosive amount of wealth over time. But to be fair, there's more to the story here. These loans do come at a cost in the form of interest expense, which most people would look at as a con, because it begs the question of how exactly are we going to pay it? Or even more so, is any of this even worth it if we have to pay interest on the money we borrow? But the wealthy look at this a little differently. They actually view interest expense as an advantage for many reasons. Like number one, interest expense is fully deductible as a business expense, which means it can be used to reduce other income you report on your taxes. For example, Jeff Bezos famously offset more than $46 million of income through deductions like the interest expense deduction. And that's just one benefit. The second benefit is that interest expense allows you to keep your original money invested. Like if you could choose between having $1 million working for you and compounding into $2 million and so on with some interest expense, or selling the $1 million investment, paying expensive capital gains taxes, and having no money working for you, which one would you choose? Let me know in the comments below. Now, the answer will be different from person to person depending on their risk tolerance, but when doing the math almost always works out better when you keep your capital working for you and deducting the interest. If incurring interest expense means that you have more money working for you, you have more capital available to make more investments, and you're able to avoid capital gains taxes while also deducting other income on your taxes, then it may make some sense. But if you hate debt, which I fully understand personally, then I get it. But if you want to know why the ultra rich is not paying taxes and have over $8 trillion in untaxed capital gains, and why they are not selling any of these assets anytime soon, this is why. They are avoiding the middleman trying to get a piece of the pie, Uncle Sam. And they are doing it by buying and accumulating assets, not income, while having the ability to borrow against those investments if they need cash. And they often hold these assets to death, allowing them to pass freely to their heirs without them paying tax either, due to the step-up basis rules, which allows them to receive these assets at its market value instead of its cost. This is how the buy, borrow, die strategy works. And almost anyone can start taking pieces away from this strategy to apply to their own situation. We have clients who learn about this and decide to buy and hold their assets instead of selling them. We have other clients who decide to make other investments where they're taking out debt and they rationalize using the interest expense as a deduction, and so much more. There's a lot that we can learn here, but let me know what you think about this in the comments below. I am curious to hear your thoughts on this. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to our channel to find out even more ways that you may be able to use to reduce your own taxes. Thank you for watching.